Okay?
Sure. Here we
Again, I want to be very clear about the fact that what I'm about to do is not going to be the perfect definition of the principles or an understanding about how we all experience life. If you take a stick and you hit a dog, the dog will bite the stick and totally forget about the guy who's holding the stick. It just has no awareness of it. I'm going to be using words and maybe a marker to describe something that's way beyond anything that I could possibly describe. So, I'm inviting you to take a look at what I'm describing, not to become a master at what I'm describing, not to become a master at my words or my illustrations or that type of stuff, but for you to get a sense at what I'm pointing to. So I'm going to try to take my finger, and for the next 2.5 days, I'm going to be pointing, and Mark's going to be pointing, and we're all going to be pointing towards something that no one can fully describe, but you can get a sense of. Okay? Now, because that's true, don't pay so much attention to my finger. You want to keep an eye on what I'm pointing to. You need to see that for yourself. I can't see it for you, no matter how brilliant and articulate I really am. Which is, you can decide that. So the way, lately at least, that I like to describe the principles is an answer to a question. It's a simple question. And the question is, how does our moment-to-moment experience get created? Okay, so if we were to break it down to the smallest unit, life. People have a lifetime, maybe up until 120 years, hopefully. I'm not talking about life in that sense. I'm not even talking about a day or an hour. I'm talking about a moment, one moment in time. This moment, right now. How does it feel? You can all take a check. Look inside. How does it feel? How are you feeling right now? I'm talking about the feeling, the experience. I'm having an experience of presenting to all of you. And the sun is coming through the shades just so, and mixing with the light that's coming from the ceiling and the drop ceiling and the carpet and the air conditioning. The totality of right now, this very moment, and everything that's included in it, all the things that are out there, the things that I'm feeling inside, the things that are in my mind, all of it. How does that show up? And before I even get into describing how it shows up, I'd like to point out that to me, we're all in, at any moment in time, we're all in an experience of some kind. I'm not busy judging it, like this is a good one, this is a bad one. I don't care about that. I'm not going to spend any time here. You guys can do that during Musar Seder. I'm talking about all experience. Okay, so if you're to take from one end of the spectrum, the loftiest, most divine, most spiritual, most connected and loving experience that you could ever imagine. That's an experience, right? Well, I'm wondering, how did that show up for me? And I'm also including in my inquiry all the experiences between that and all the way down to the other end of the spectrum, the lowest, most disgusting, most putrid, disconnected, hateful that you could think of. Well, that's also an experience, right? I don't care if it's good or bad. I'm not busy with that. But it is an experience. It's something that you feel and you're awake to. Well, how does that show up? So you've got those two extremes and everything in between. I really don't care what kind of experience we're talking about. And I'm not going to be busy in trying to changing these. I'm not going to tell you something that should give you the ability to change your experiences. I'm not doing that. Remember, we've left that at the door. I just want to understand. How is it showing up in the first place? That's it. That's all I want to know. So that's the question that we're going to examine. Psychology has been busy trying to answer this question for a long time. So they came up with a lot of theories about why people act the way that they do. Why do they feel the way that they do? So some theories, Freudian analysts, a lot of it, pure Freud, is that it's rooted in, born of your childhood experiences. Your mother didn't diaper you quickly enough when you were a little kid, you're gonna, I don't know, have a hard time with your boss or something. I don't know. It's whatever they've figured out. Whatever it's rooted in your childhood, which is why pure Freudian approaches are rejected by Judaism, because we, as fundamental to our faith, is a belief and a knowledge of the fact that we have the ability to choose in this moment, no matter what. We can transcend anything. It's something that we absolutely fundamentally believe in. Freud basically says that's not true. You're predetermined. So that was just one theory about why people are the way that they are. So let's say it's their childhood. A whole school of approach is society. Society controls how you feel. You're influenced by the people that you live with. Family psychology, family dynamics, all that stuff will determine how your next moment is going to feel for you. So that if I don't know, your spouse looks at you crooked, you're going to feel upset. That's just the way it works. So people from the outside can affect how you're going to feel in this moment, and based on how you feel, it's going to determine how you can act. And that's just a couple of theories. There are some stranger ones, like the weather. Some people believe that the weather determines how they feel. And to them, it's not funny. It's actually very serious. Every time it rains, it's going to be a miserable day. And they really believe... That's strange. Not strange at all, right? And they really believe that the weather has the power to affect their feeling in the moment. And if the sun would just come out, they'd feel good again. I think I heard from George Pransky once that there are over 400 different theories in psychology as to why it is that people feel the way that they do. And what I would like to do is show you a paradigm through which experience always shows up, all of it, through one way. So it's going to simplify. It should take off your mind all the things that are no longer going to be considered as sources for how you feel in the moment. It's always going to be one thing. It's always going to be showing up through one system. Okay? So just to kind of, because I've teased you guys long enough, I think we should actually say what the principles are. Yes?
Okay.
All right. We got permission from Mark. You can change your mind. Okay. So we've got a paradigm. And as we talked in the first session, a paradigm is a way that something works. So it works through this paradigm. And if something is a paradigm, it means that if there's only one paradigm, it means that it only works one way. It only comes through this paradigm, and there's nothing outside that can get into the system unless it's coming through this paradigm. So there's me and my experience, and in order for my experience to show up, there are three elements or basic principles that are in play in order for it to show up. And that would be the principle of mind, the principle of thought, and the principle of consciousness. I have no clue.
Oh no, that's the couscous.
That's couscous.
That's couscous.
It's okay.
It's good enough for me.
Consciousness.
Consciousness.
He does this a lot better than he spells.
Now here's the thing. I don't want to get into so much about what mind is, what thought is, what consciousness is. That's not the first point that I want to make. The point that I want to really hit home right now is that if something's showing up down here, it's happening through this paradigm of mind, consciousness, and thought. Three powers that come together to create your experience. And there's nothing else that creates your experience,
we talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to pause in just a second, and then I want you to take it away. There's a bunch of things out here that do not affect our experience. They would include your past, they would include your circumstances, they would include your bank account, they would include your kids, they would include the weather, they would include anything other than mind, consciousness, and thought, whatever it is. But what we're saying, and what I'm saying is, I'm not asking you to agree with me or not, but I'd like you to at least see that I'm being very clear about this, is that there is just one way that it works. It works through mind, consciousness, and thought, whatever that is, and that everything else couldn't do anything to affect your experience, even if it wanted to. And we'll get more into that, but go ahead.
First of all, I wanted to comment that obviously you went to the same art school that I went to. Similar style.
That's me.
That's excellent, excellent. I had 3 years of architecture school. I can't do any better.
Devil. It's got like a pitchfork there.
Okay. Okay. So I want to just expand on just to maybe sit on this point a little bit more, because it's probably worth getting a little bit more clearer on it, because there are a couple of false paradigms that I think are very prevalent, and I think it'll help us understand what the real paradigm is that we're talking about. And Tzvi touched upon it. I just want to expand on it a little bit. So, as Tzvi mentioned, there is certainly times in our life, I think we all fall into this, when we feel like the reason we're going through something, the reason we're having an experience, is because of something out there. And as Tzvi so nicely put it, there's your bank accounts, and there's your love life, and there's your all the things going on, the roof over your head, and your job and your family. There's a million things going on in our lives, and it's so easy to really be convinced, to really feel like, I called the bank up today and I thought I had, $1,000 in my checking account, and I found that I only have $50. Oh my God, I'm feeling really insecure right now. Well, so if I came up to you and I said, why are you feeling insecure? What would you likely tell me? Well, because my bank account is not what I thought it was, and wouldn't anybody feel that way if they found out that their bank account had $950 less than they thought? So, isn't it obvious? So we're suggesting no. We're suggesting that that's a false paradigm. And going back to what we said about paradigms are very powerful influences in our life, because if we believe that, well, there's many implications to that, obviously, because let's face it, there's a lot going on in life that we don't get to vote on. There's a lot that goes on that we really have no choice, and things don't always end up the way we want them to. People don't always behave the way we think they should. And so, we're surrounded by all this stuff, and that's what we have a name for this paradigm. We call it outside in. Right? The outside world is what shapes my inside experience of life. But I'd like to suggest that we all know that that's really not a full explanation. That explanation doesn't work. How do we know? How do we know this explanation really doesn't take into account human experience? Yeah.
Because you can have two people with similar circumstances, but who react totally differently.
Yeah. Two people, right, who are experiencing the exact same thing, and entirely different experiences. We have a word for that. You know what that's called? Marriage.
What's that? Touche.
Even more than that. Even more than that, we have within our own experience, right? Have you ever noticed sometimes you really get excited about something or whatever? Somebody says something to you and you get all offended and you want to like write them a long letter and and tell them how you're thinking and you hold off, and you wisely, hopefully, you hold off and you wake up the next morning and you're like, what was I so upset about? You ever had that experience before, right? Nothing changed. They didn't write you a sorry note. They didn't apologize, ask for forgiveness. They didn't fix it. I mean, it just looks different. So the problem with the outside-in model is it doesn't work. But we fall into it, right? We all fall into it at times, don't we? Does we agree, right? It's like, oh, God, of course I'm feeling insecure. I mean, of course I'm feeling upset. This person just screamed at me. I mean, how could anybody not? I love that. I always hear that all the time. How can I experience this any differently? That's what the outside-in model brings. So most of us have a little more of a sophisticated understanding. And that's what I like to refer to as more of a mixed paradigm. So I think most of us, when we consider it, we would say, well, yes, there are outside influences in our life, and they do impact us, but there's also the way we think about things, right? One person handles, monetary challenges for whatever reason. They're more chilled out about it. Another person gets real uptight about it. And what's at the bottom of that? Well, they tend to think about maybe money differently, maybe whatever it is that we're talking about differently. So that's what we call a mixed paradigm. And I think that's where most people are holding in life. Most people get the fact. We're not that simple. We get the fact that our thinking influences our experience. But we look at it but there's also the realities that we're dealing with, and they have an impact. And so, just to highlight what Tzvi has been saying, we're coming in with a rather extreme statement here, and we want to put it right out there in front of you. We're suggesting that mixed paradigm is also a false paradigm. Okay? In other words, what you're experiencing in your world, all of that stuff, all of the facts, people, places, things, circumstances, all of that stuff that we get so caught up in has, in truth, little to nothing to do with what's going on inside of you. And I'd like to suggest that when you really consider it, it's kind of obvious. Because after all, where does the human experience take place? Where does our emotional experience take place? Out there or somewhere inside of us, right? It's all taking place within us. It's within our neurology, if you want to speak about it scientifically, right? It's a neurological experience. It's in your mind, right? There's no way I can fit the world inside of me. It's not what's going on. It's a totally different thing. Everything comes through our neurology. Everything comes through our thinking. So I like to say, when people say, does this apply, to me? I say it generally applies to anything that has to do with human beings thinking. I mean, so that's pretty broad. But that's what we're talking about. So we're suggesting that the real true paradigm is what we call inside out. And what we're suggesting is that everything I experience is the product of an inner process. It's the product of something that's happening within me. And that means each and every one of us is having our own unique experience of life at any given moment. And if anything, it's the opposite. If anything, how we experience life inside of us has an impact outside. In other words, if I have my own way of thinking about stuff, like let's say I have, and by the way, when we talk about thought, we're talking about not just the thoughts that we are conscious of, right? Everybody knows that we think a lot, right? We think a lot, and we don't just think a lot volitionally, it's not just because we're trying to think a lot, it's because there's like a 50-lane highway of thought going through our heads, pretty much at 78 speed. Anybody remembers records back then, right? I'm dating myself big time. Yeah. Is anybody here under the age of 50? I knew I was getting old when I was hiking with my kids and they were walking in the woods and my kids pick up they found an old record and my daughter picks it. She goes, "Look, Abba, a giant CD." So there's a lot of thought going on, and by the way, we're conscious of probably a very small percentage of it. Okay, I mean we have beliefs about life, we have beliefs about ourselves. You know, somebody might be walking around thinking, you know, if somebody really knew me, they might not like me. You know, there are people who walk around, they may never really know that they think that. But what we're suggesting is that a thought like that would create an experience for somebody of, you know, that actually might impact the world. So if I'm walking around with an experience like that, of thinking like that, even if it's under the radar, and I go into a party, and I'm thinking, boy, I better not get too close to anybody, so I hang out by the bookshelf. And then I walk out saying, you see, nobody talks to me, right? You know? But the truth is, in a sense, that's the inside out part. So we're suggesting, in essence, we live in and this is something Chazal says, we live in an olam nehefach, an upside down world. So we're suggesting we have an upside down paradigm that most of us are walking around with. We're really here to kind of set your paradigm on its side and suggest we've got it actually backwards. That if anything's influencing anything, it's the way we think. That somehow, or these three things we haven't gotten into, it's more than just thought, obviously, but whatever it is that we create within us, that actually shapes the way we relate to our world, and might even shape the way our world relates to us. How does that sitting with people? Does anybody has any thoughts or questions about that idea? So yeah.
Very similar to the law of attraction.
Uh-huh. What do you mean?
The paradigm you're describing seems...
I'm not so familiar with the law of attraction. I just want to make sure we're on the same page with what you mean by that.
But you tend to attract in life that which is a reflection of your thoughts. If you have positive thoughts, you attract positive things and negative thoughts. To simplify it. I mean, I'm not an expert in it, but that strikes me as very similar.
Okay. Yeah, that I mean, okay. What do you have a comment on that?
I've heard that a few times before about law of attraction. And without going too deeply into, there's a book about it. What is it called? The Secret?
Secret, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Very popular.
Oh, okay, that's what we're talking about. Okay.
Jay, you'll tell me if I'm wrong. But, oh, sorry. My understanding is that the Secret was very popular because it gave people a way to attract things into their, get stuff that they wanted. So if you would think in a certain direction, you'll get that in your life. And that sounds like something to do, some way to manipulate your world. Maybe it works, I don't know. But the principles are a description for how this moment showed up. And it's interesting because the direction, and this is what all I'm going to say about it, and I'm going to stop, is that the direction that the principles has taken us recently is a destruction of ego. In essence, the principles destroys ego, whereas the law of attraction builds more of it.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get into why, but I just want to be very clear about that. If the principles aren't killing your ego over and over, and killing my ego over and over, then it's not the principles. And the law of attraction promotes people's desires and getting what they want. So I know that they're separate paths. That's all I can say on it right now.
Yeah, I think you were maybe in a more specific way, not getting into the whole thing about the secret, because I understand what that is. Yeah,
I'm not.
Yeah, it's very.
No verse in this, but it's my understanding the law of attraction probably predates the secret. The secret just tried to take that concept and turn it into.
Yeah, in the specific that you're speaking about, yeah, I'm saying that, yeah, at times the way I look at things has influence on the way I relate to my world, obviously. That's all I'm saying. It's not
Isn't that the
complicated.
same as what we're doing here? If we have positive thoughts, we have positive experience.
Yeah, so yes, we see that when we're thinking more positively, exactly. So the world looks sometimes nicer. That's what we're saying, and that might have an influence on how we relate to the world. Not complicated. Yeah.
And what would the principles say about, let's say, extreme situations, abuse, concentration camps?
Right. Great question.
I mean, starvation. Extreme situations. Sorry.
Nothing different. Nothing different in the sense that,
very hard to hear.
No. So in other words, we're not telling you how to think. We're just suggesting that people think differently, and so in any given situation, and even we think differently from moment to moment within ourselves. So you don't have to go from person to person. So I think the truth is the same across the board. In other words, we know that let's say there's abuse. Yes. Let's say you went into a shelter of women who were running away from their abusive spouses. You would find, if there were 100 women in there, you'd find 100 experiences of abuse. We're not here to tell you that abuse is good or bad, or you should, shrug it off and be happy about it. We're not here to tell you how to think. We're just saying that, we know Viktor Frankl wrote a book about being in the concentration camps, a very famous book called, Man's Search for Meaning, and that was exactly what he talked about. Is people had very different experiences of being in these. We're not.
So you're not saying somebody should that person is able to be happy.
Lighten up. You're just in a concentration camp. No, that's not what we're. No. No. Please.
You create your own experience. Like,
We're just observing human. We're not telling anybody how to think. Nobody can tell anybody how to think. You're going to think the way you think, no matter what. I have 3 teenagers, so I know nobody can tell anybody how to think. Okay. It's not about that. We're just describing the fact, and it really doesn't matter. You can come up with any experience we're suggesting. It's regardless of the entire range of human experience from one end to the other. And if you have 2 human beings, or even the same human being from moment to moment, right, you will often even see within the same human being. Not always, and sometimes.
But aren't people impacted from situations like that?
So once again, what I'm suggesting is we're not here to tell you there's no reality. We're not here to tell you the concentration camp doesn't exist, or the room that we're sitting in is not here. We're having an experience of something that's there. All we're saying is that everybody has a different way of experiencing things, and we're trying to understand where that comes from. That's all. So
Yeah. So
Your weapons.
Yeah. What we just again, we haven't yet explained what mind, consciousness, and thought are. I think I made the point that it only comes through this way, and then Mark was pointing out this idea that what we're saying with the mind, thought, and consciousness is that it works from the inside out, as opposed to outside in. That would mean that there would be no circumstance that would be able to affect me without it being linked to the system. It's got to get linked to me. And the only way it gets linked to me is through mind, thought, and consciousness. Which is why when someone is, chas v'shalom, in a concentration camp and they are experiencing horror, that horror shows up through mind, thought, and consciousness. When someone is in a concentration camp, and we all heard the story, dancing on Simchas Torah, that also comes through mind, thought, and consciousness. And these things operate independently of where you are. Which is why you can be in the same circumstance and everyone can be having their individual experience in the most horrific to us, that everyone would say, oh, this is a horrific situation. You still could find someone who their system of mind, thought, and consciousness is bringing them a divinely connected spiritual experience that even brings them to dance and joy. That's possible. Because the jurisdiction or the authority is not held by what's out here. The authority is held only through this. So yes, people are affected by their circumstances, but only if they have thought and consciousness that are bringing them that specific experience. And otherwise, they will not be affected by their circumstances. So again, we're spending a little bit of time on eliminating everything else, your circumstances, your past, your personality, your genetics. None of that stuff can create your experience in the moment. The only thing that creates your experience in the moment is mind, thought, and consciousness. When we say mind, we don't mean brain. I don't mean even your personal mind. I mean the energy or the power of all things from before life, before existence. Can you imagine before existence? You can't see it because you're in existence. But you can imagine before existence, what is there? There's nothing but God. Mind is another way to say God. It is an infinite, endless source of everything, yet it is nothing. It has no beginning, it has no end. But anytime you're going to examine anything at all, Reishis Chachma Yiras Hashem. If you want to really understand, they say you go deep down into you break down a rock to the atoms, and from the atoms to the molecules. You go all the way down, and you come to the God particle, I think they refer to it. And you go back the other way, you go out beyond the universe, you're going to find also God. Doesn't make any difference what you're examining. We're examining one thing. We're examining my experience in the moment. I want to understand how that shows up. And it always begins with God. You have to start with God. Now, there's more than just God. I'm not saying God is a religious thing, as someone that's giving us the Torah. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a mere fact that if there's something that exists, there had to be something that preceded it. How would it exist otherwise? That's a basic logic. If I'm having an experience in the moment, it came from somewhere. And you want to start with God. You want to start with mind. You want to start with the energy that allows for things to be. Whatever that might be. I don't know what it looks like. I don't think I ever can possibly comprehend it. Yes?
Does that suggest that we're talking about God controls the world? Or is it just plain God?
I'm talking about that God exists as a fact.
It has nothing to do with control over
Well,
events?
we can also see that this energy, or this mind, this great mind, is incredibly intelligent. And that it doesn't just make things into being willy-nilly. It's got a verification process. It's got according to certain Shittas, I think it took a few thousand years till the world, they settled on which world it was going to be. So whatever you actually see and gets created, it was specifically created, perfectly created, precisely created for you, including your inner world, what's going on inside of you. It was created for you. So I'm glad you pointed that out. Mind is not just some, rampant force that's just running across the world making stuff. It's an intelligent energy. That's what we got to. You need that. It's a principle. Its existence is. There's no exceptions to it. There's no place that mind doesn't influence and exist and create. It's everywhere.
Why is it called mind rather than God?
Good question. Let's not get busy with the words, but you can see what we're pointing to, right?
If the word God works for you,
Oh, I see.
use it.
Oh, okay.
I use a different word. I call it, there's wisdom in
It's
the words.
interchangeable.
There's wisdom. I look at it as a soul. Everybody there's a wisdom within every human being. And there's a wisdom behind everything in creation, which is what Tzvi is saying. Whatever word works for you.
It's not our mind, it's a mind.
Yeah.
The mind.
The mind.
It's universal.
Universal.
Well, the reason why, it's a good question. Why don't we use the word God?
Higher power.
Why don't we use the word higher power?
It makes it universal.
Well, unfortunately, there are people, and this has happened just a few weeks ago. I went to teach a family in Williamsburg. Chassidim. And like, don't use the word God. They can't hear it. They've been bombarded with Musar for so many years that they just can't hear it anymore. Don't talk to me about God. Don't talk to me about what I should be doing. They're not open for business that way. many people have a concept of what God is. I don't know what your concept is, but whatever it is, I'm not talking about that. If you have a concept of God, it's bigger than that.
Can you just use the word life force? Just like a life force? That, I mean, maybe they can't, there is a life force, whatever that might be.
Well, no, that's not what I'm talking about, because that would be something, that would be more into the consciousness line. We'll get to that in a minute, but that's already after creation. Life is after the fact.
Life is after existence.
Existence. Life is something that is. I'm talking about something that is before is. It's before, we can't comprehend it with our minds. It's something that's beyond our mind's work, that we can recognize things that begin, that end, that have a shape, that have a form. Even a thought has a beginning and an end. It has some. This is something that is before everything. It's not something that can be fully comprehended. Yet we can get a sense that it exists. We can comprehend that God exists. Well, before I take any more questions, I just want to kind of tie this together for a minute.
Other than God for it to be to fit, so.
Well, I want to remind everybody here, not just you. I want to remind everybody. The more that you try to figure out what I'm saying, the less you're going to let mind do its business. So this is going to. Don't worry whether it makes sense or not. You can make fun of me afterwards. He made no sense. People do that. It's good. It's fine. It's fine. Let it make not sense. Would that be something that you would be okay with? To let it not make sense for 5 minutes, and then afterwards you can say, you know, this doesn't make sense. I'm out of here.
No,
5 minutes?
Don't go out of here. Don't go out. Stick around.
Stick around. But is 5 minutes of not making sense, is that okay?
Our college courses that didn't make sense.
Yeah. And you stayed anyway.
And you got credit for it.
And you paid $30,000.
The truth is I'm reminded when I first started learning the principles, I had 8 sessions, and I didn't think it made any sense. I thought she was wrong. It's not true that people can transcend anything. I'll show you people that ain't transcending another thing in their life. They're so messed up and broken and have been influenced by their past. There's just, maybe they get them on the right meds, they'll be able to, stumble through life, but that they're going to thrive and have connected, effective, functional lives, not going to happen. I could show you 3 just on the next block. And so it didn't make sense to me, and it didn't make sense after the 8th session either. And I left with that question. The only reason why I stayed, and I probably would not have otherwise, was because Rabbi Twerski asked me to investigate these ideas for myself. Now, had he not asked me to do that, I probably would have been out of there much sooner. But because of I was blessed with a relationship with him, that he's my Rav, and even if my Rav tells me on my left is my right is my left, I listen anyway. So I stuck it out. If you could stick it out, not on my accord, not for my covet, but maybe on Rabbi Twerski's, or maybe just because,
Can I insert just a quick comment on
Yeah.
that? One of the nice things about sometimes I work with people and they say, I don't understand, and I say, that's great. That's good news. Because what you understand is what you already know. And as I often say to my clients, how's that working for you? We're here to learn something new. And so the fact that we don't understand it, we're suggesting as you immerse, things are going to start to form for you, and you'll start to see it. But it's not always bad news that you don't understand it. It means something new is coming around the corner, and maybe that will be helpful a little bit. Yeah.
Is it possible you're saying, I'm groping, is it possible you're saying that we don't understand God's ways?
Not really. I'm just here to say that if we're talking and you don't understand us, forget about God's ways. If you don't understand us, it means that there's something new maybe. There's an opportunity. and have just let that be and kind of be open to it as well.
Yeah, I really, I just want to make sure that you guys are okay with that, because if something doesn't make sense, and that if it doesn't make sense to you, you're not willing to just listen and hang out until you get your question answered immediately. I don't know, maybe Mark does, but I don't have, I haven't been blessed with the perfect words to make this, instantly clear to everybody. So I just want to make sure if anyone has any objections with being in a presentation that doesn't necessarily make sense, but they're not willing to let their questions just slide for a few minutes. So let me know, and maybe we'll try to modify. But I really want it to be okay. If it's not okay with you, please let me know. Yeah.
Using your terms on grasping, because we're in our happiness group, we've been going through this, Betty's going through this with us. Using the terms you put on the board, to have experiences that come from outside in. So something had to create those factors outside that you're feeling inside, or things that you're feeling inside, So using your words, those outside things that are supposedly giving me an experience, where did they come from? They didn't just plop there. So therefore, a mind, something created them that had an intelligence to create it. And yes, we cannot grasp what really God is. We all have to come to terms with that ourselves, because it is so vast. It amazed me when I learned scientists are realizing God is still creating, the universe is still expanding. If that don't boggle your mind, what will? So we're using here the word mind as that force that is intelligent, obviously has an intelligence, is not random and bouncing off the wall, creating those outside factors or inside factors that is giving you the experience of this moment.
Yeah. Very nicely said.
And,
Yes.
Thanks. I would just want to say that from my superficial understanding, what this paradigm is directing makes 100% perfect sense, because I've experienced many situations that what was going on the outside really didn't affect my peace of mind, and other times, something less impactful did. And so I appreciate basically the filtering that takes place of the outside experiences in order for, that the thought and consciousness may do. My question is just about a perception of mind, and my question is whether or not mind is also something which is inside us, or mind, you're talking about something which is God controlling the entire universe, or you're talking about something inside.
Great question.
My question is whether or not it would be accurate or guiding to suggest that mind is some sort of intrinsic pre-programming that's inside us, that controls our body, that controls our physical experiences, and that this intrinsic pre-programming is something that is the first filter through which things occur. And it's what's the hormonal system, the nerve system that's controlling our body that experiences those things. And that and so in other words, it's the way that we work before thought or consciousness. It's to me, when you say mind and you're saying God, I'm just wondering whether or not it's the way that we are physiologically programmed. Some things that are out of our control, whether or not we can control mind, understand our ability to control thought and through thought consciousness. And my understanding is very superficial. I apologize if I'm saying things that are not true according to the three principles. But whether or not the mind is something that is pre-programmed inside, and if that's what you mean by God's input into us, that's my question.
But yeah, I mean, what I think we're talking about is a universal intelligence behind life, and we see, you know, there's chachma in the world. It's everywhere, from the smallest to the biggest, as Tzvi said, and it's inside of you. Yes, it's part. You're part of existence. So yes, it's there. You know, we have a similar concept within our faith, that we have chachma within us, that the angel taught us, right? That it's right there. It touched us here. We forgot it. Right, we're simply saying that there's an intelligence, and yes, absolutely, there's an intelligence that is behind us and within us. Was that helpful?
It's what? It's 12:30.
12:35.
What time is lunch?
12:30.
Wow, time
12:30.
flies when you're having fun.
Okay.
It's 12:35.
Hold on. I would just like to point out that I didn't even finish talking about the principles.
We're tough food.
Okay, now that's fine. But I want to help you by showing you that I have not finished talking about the principles, and that I'm not sure how anyone could even disagree with what I've said if I haven't said it yet.
This is a Jewish audience.
Yeah, it's Jewish. As long as we're okay with that. You can argue with me as long as you've known that I at least recognize that I haven't even gotten them out yet. So we've talked a little bit about mind, a little bit about thought, a little about consciousness. We haven't defined them. We spent a lot of time on saying what it isn't, not too much time about what it is. But that's okay, don't worry about it. Hold on. We got a couple of things we got to take care of before lunch.
I just wanted to know if maybe we should wait for questions until after we actually say what it is.
Well, we're going to discuss that on the break. We'll see if that's something that's helpful, but usually the questions are good for everybody.
There's a parable about the blind men who are touching the elephant. He has to describe the elephant, and
Yes.
one person is touching the tail, and they say, "Oh, an elephant is something that's very, very thin, very, very thin." Somebody is touching the trunk. The blind man saying, "Oh, an elephant is something very, very long." And the third person is touching a different part of the elephant and describing the elephant. I think the same way here. At this point, we are like blind men
Right.
touching a part of the elephant, and so it's really unfair until our eyes are open to really to speak about anything else, because now we're still blindfolded.
I'm glad that you can see that. That's very helpful for you. No, I don't mean that as a joke. If you can see that, basically you're going back to when you were a child and you knew that you didn't know. So you were in the busy discovering, whereas if you've kind of developed like me, I think I know it. So I've stopped looking. If you've got that, if you're coming from that vantage point, you're way ahead of most of the world.
Wait for
So-
the whole elephant.
Yeah.
Right.
Keep on waiting.
That